The colony was quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that carried both peace and fear. Human settlers lived on the edge of survival, building their lives on soil that was not their own. Above them, beyond the stone hills, lived the Giantess clans, beings taller than any building the humans had built, beings who had watched them from a distance but rarely crossed into their world. Children whispered stories about their steps shaking the ground, about eyes glowing in the night, and about the dangerous traditions that no human ever wanted to test. Most settlers prayed they would never have to speak directly to one of them. But fate does not listen to prayers, and fate did not care about Daniel's silence that evening. Daniel had only wanted to finish his work before dark. He was young, barely into manhood, with hands rough from labor but a heart that still carried a trace of wonder about the universe. As the sun bled red across the horizon, he spotted movement near the tree line. He froze. Out of the shadows stepped a shape so massive it blocked the dying light. A giantess. Her skin shimmered faintly with silver marks, her long hair caught the wind like strands of burning copper, and her eyes, sharp, golden eyes, locked onto him as though he had been standing there for her alone. Every instinct told Daniel to look down, stay silent, and walk away. But his feet would not move, and his throat tightened as her towering form drew closer. The earth shook softly under each step. She leaned down, and for the first time he saw the full detail of her face. It was not cruel. It was not even angry. It was powerful, regal, beautiful in a way that unsettled him. His heart raced, and before his mind could stop his mouth, the words slipped out. You are very strong. And beautiful. The silence that followed was heavier than the weight of her steps. The air itself seemed to pause. Daniel's eyes widened as he realized what he had said. To a human woman, it would have been nothing, just polite words spoken nervously. But to a giantess, to one of their warrior kind, words were not thrown carelessly into the air. They were promises, oaths, chains. The giantess tilted her head slowly, and her lips curved, not into a smile but something deeper, something sharper. You honor me with your words, little one, she said, her voice low and thunderous, carrying into the settlement beyond the fields. And by our law, you have spoken the vow. Daniel's heart sank. He stepped back, stammering. No, I meant only respect. I didn't. But her golden eyes did not soften. Respect is no small thing, she replied. A man who speaks such words before me is bound to them. You are now under oath. You have given me the right to claim you. From the settlement, whispers rose. A crowd had gathered at the edges of the fields, too frightened to come closer, but unable to look away. The elders whispered among themselves, horror on their faces, for they knew what Daniel did not. To compliment a giantess in such a manner was to declare loyalty, a pledge of union, a promise of duty. No human had been foolish enough to do it before. Until now. Daniel shook his head, desperate. Please, you don't understand. I didn't mean it that way. It was only. Her massive hand lowered to the ground beside him, the fingers pressing into the earth like roots, trapping him in place without even touching him. Her gaze held no anger, only certainty. At moonrise tomorrow, she said, her voice echoing across the settlement, you will stand before me and fulfill what you have promised. There will be no refusal. There will be no escape. You spoke, and now you are mine. The words struck him harder than a blow. The settlers gasped, some backing away as though the mere sound of her claim was dangerous. Children clung to their mothers. Even the strongest men lowered their eyes. For a giantess to claim a human was unthinkable. For her to do it openly was worse. It was a message, one that the entire colony would carry in their hearts like a shadow. Daniel tried again to protest, but the giantess rose to her full height, her silhouette blotting out the stars that had begun to rise. Until tomorrow, she said, and then she turned, her steps shaking the ground as she vanished back into the trees. Only then did Daniel's knees weaken, and only then did the crowd dare to approach him. The elders placed their hands on his shoulders, their eyes grim. One of them whispered, Do you know what you've done, boy? Do you know what you've promised? But Daniel had no answer. His words had been simple, harmless, or so he thought. Yet now they carried the weight of law, the weight of an alien tradition, and the weight of a giantess's claim. The moon had not yet risen, but already the night felt darker. Already, the word duty rang in his mind like a sentence. The colony would not sleep that night. And neither would Daniel. The settlement awoke the next morning under a cloud heavier than any storm. The news had spread through the wooden streets and stone homes like fire racing across dry grass. By dawn, every man, woman, and child knew what Daniel had done. Some pitied him. Some feared him. But most feared what his words would bring upon them all. To the humans, the Giantess clans were not only distant neighbors, they were forces of nature, beings who could destroy the settlement with a single march if insulted. And now one of their warriors had marked Daniel, binding him in a tradition no human truly understood. Daniel himself had not slept. His eyes were red from staring at the ceiling of his small room, replaying every moment of the encounter. He had heard the weight in her voice, seen the certainty in her eyes. He tried to convince himself it was a mistake, a misunderstanding that could be explained away. But every time he remembered the silence of the crowd and the grave faces of the elders, that hope withered. Words were not empty to the Giantess people. They were contracts. And he had signed one with his tongue. By mid-morning, the elders summoned him. Their hall was dim, lit only by shafts of sunlight through cracks in the stone roof. Men and women far older than Daniel sat in a circle, their faces lined with the burden of years and decisions. The oldest among them, a man named Harvin, spoke first. His voice was deep, steady, and without mercy. You have spoken the vow, Daniel. Whether you meant it or not does not matter. The Giantess has claimed you, and by their custom, that claim cannot be broken. Daniel's voice cracked as he answered, I didn't mean it. It was politeness, nothing more. The elder shook his head slowly. To us, yes. But not to them. You spoke in her presence, and you spoke of beauty and strength. Those are words of binding in their tongue. To her, you swore loyalty. To her, you offered your duty. If you refuse her now, she will see it as betrayal. And betrayal from a human means war. The room was silent after that word. War. A word none of them dared to speak lightly. The settlers had weapons, yes, but against the giantesses? Against beings who could crush a house with a single hand? It would not be war. It would be slaughter. Daniel clenched his fists. So I'm to be sacrificed then? Just handed over to her because of some accident? Another elder, a woman named Sarah, leaned forward. Her eyes were cold but sorrowful. Sacrificed? No. You are claimed. Do you not understand? Among their people, to be chosen is an honor. They see it as the highest gift. She has marked you not as prey, but as partner. The word chilled him even more. Partner. Union. He had heard rumors, half-whispered stories about what the Giantess clans did when they took someone as theirs. Some said it was marriage, binding for life. Others claimed it was servitude, endless duty under their command. Still others said it was worse, ritual, sacrifice, blood-bound to their ancient ways. Daniel did not know which story was true, and that ignorance was its own prison. When he left the council hall, the villagers avoided his gaze. Mothers pulled their children closer. Men turned their backs, unwilling to meet the eyes of the one cursed with a giantess's attention. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt like a stranger in his own home. The day dragged toward dusk, and with it came the heavy weight of the promise. He sat outside the settlement walls, staring at the horizon, watching as the red sun began to sink. He thought of running, of fleeing into the hills, vanishing before she arrived. But deep inside, he knew it would not matter. The giantess would find him. Her kind could track a human as easily as smoke follows the wind. As the light dimmed, the earth began to tremble. A hush swept through the settlement. Every head turned toward the trees at the edge of the valley. She was coming. Celera, daughter of the storm clans, warrior of her people. Her shadow grew long across the fields, swallowing houses and hearts alike. Daniel rose to his feet, every muscle screaming to flee, but his legs obeyed a different command. He stood, frozen, as she emerged once more into the open. Her eyes found him instantly, as if no one else existed. The settlement seemed to vanish behind him, every voice silenced, every breath held. Only her, and him. She stopped before him, lowering her head so her golden eyes locked with his. The ground cracked beneath her weight, but her gaze was steady, unshaken. Her voice rolled over him like thunder. You stand, as I commanded. Good. You know your duty. Daniel swallowed hard. His voice was thin, but he forced the words out. I don't understand your law. I didn't mean to bind myself to you. Her lips curved in a strange expression, part amusement, part warning. You spoke. You honored me. Words are not wind among my kind, they are stone. You will learn this. And you will learn me. Gasps rose from the villagers. Daniel's hands trembled, but he raised his chin, refusing to bow. Something inside him, the smallest flicker of defiance, told him he could not simply surrender. He had to try, at least once, to make her understand. Celera, he said, his voice firmer now, though his chest pounded. I didn't choose this. I'm not one of your people. You can't force me to be. The giantess leaned closer, so close her breath stirred the dust at his feet. Force? No. I claim. I take what is mine by law and by vow. You gave me words, human. Now you will give me more. Tomorrow, you leave with me. You will stand before my clan. You will prove your worth. And if you fail... Her golden eyes glowed like fire in the growing night. Then both you and your people will pay the price. Her words fell like a hammer, breaking what little hope remained. She rose, turning back toward the trees, her form swallowed by shadows once more. The ground trembled with each fading step, and soon only silence remained. Daniel stood alone, the eyes of the settlement burning into his back. The elders said nothing, for there was nothing left to say. Tomorrow he would be taken. Tomorrow his life would change. Or end. The moon lifted over the hills, pale and cold. Daniel looked up at it and felt its weight press down like chains. Duty. That word again. His own tongue had bound him, and now there was no way back. Tomorrow awaited. The dawn that followed was not like others. It was not the soft sound of hammers building homes, nor the quiet talk of traders setting out on the roads. It was silence, an uneasy silence that covered the settlement like a shroud. Even the birds seemed to hold their voices, as though the land itself knew what was about to happen. Daniel rose from his bed long before the sun had cleared the hills, his eyes red from another sleepless night. Every muscle felt heavy, not from work but from the weight of the promise that chained him to the giantess. The elders came to him in the gray light of morning. They did not speak words of comfort, for comfort was useless now. Instead, they gave him a small satchel with food, water, and a cloak. Old Harvin placed his hand on Daniel's shoulder. Go with dignity, boy. Remember that the eyes of your people will be on you, and perhaps, through you, we may yet keep peace. Daniel wanted to argue, to shout, to run. But the cold truth settled in his chest like stone, there was no running. Celera would find him wherever he went. His only choice now was to face her. The ground began to tremble before the sun had risen fully. From the edge of the forest, she came again, her form tall and unyielding, her steps shaking the earth with every movement. Celera stopped at the edge of the fields and looked down upon the settlement. She did not speak to the crowd. Her golden eyes searched only for him. Daniel stepped forward, his legs stiff but steady. The villagers parted in silence, no one daring to stop him, no one daring to follow. When he reached the open field, Celera crouched and lowered her hand. Her palm was broad as a wagon, the lines etched like carved stone. Her voice rumbled. Climb. The clan awaits. The thought of placing himself in her hand filled him with terror, but the eyes of his people burned into his back. He could not turn away now. With a deep breath, he climbed onto her hand. Her skin was warm, and when her fingers curled slightly to hold him, he felt the power of a cage that could crush him in an instant. Then she lifted him high into the air, and the settlement shrank below, a patchwork of roofs and fields that suddenly seemed small and fragile. She carried him through the forest, the wind rushing past him with each stride. Trees bent away from her, and the earth cracked beneath her steps. Hours passed, though Daniel could not tell time clearly from so high above the ground. Finally, the trees opened into a vast clearing, and there before him stood the stronghold of the Giantess clan. It was not a city like humans built. It was carved into cliffs and stone, towers rising like mountain peaks, each one wrapped in banners of crimson and black. Fires burned in pits large enough to swallow houses, and voices thundered in a tongue Daniel could not understand. Dozens of giantesses stood in the courtyard, their eyes turning towards Celera as she approached. When she set Daniel down upon a stone platform, he felt their stares pierce into him, cold and measuring. Celera's voice rose, sharp and commanding. She spoke to her people in their language, her words booming across the stronghold. The crowd responded with a roar that shook Daniel's bones. Then her gaze fell back to him, and she spoke in the human tongue. You stand before the clan now. You gave me words, and here you must prove them. Our law demands trial. If you succeed, you will be bound in honor. If you fail, you will not leave this place alive. Daniel's mouth went dry. What trial? Celera's eyes gleamed. The trial of duty. 3 tasks, as old as our bloodlines. You will face them all. If your heart breaks, if your body fails, you die. If you endure, you live, and you belong to us. Before he could speak, 2 giantesses stepped forward, carrying weapons larger than trees. They struck the ground, and the sound echoed like thunder. Celera pointed to the first of 3 stone circles carved into the courtyard. Step inside. Begin. Daniel's legs shook, but he moved forward, stepping into the circle. The first trial began immediately. A massive stone weight, carved into the shape of a beast, was dropped before him. It was impossible for one man to lift. The crowd laughed, a rumble like rolling thunder, until Celera silenced them with a glare. Daniel stared at the stone and knew he could never raise it. But then he looked closer. The base was cracked, uneven. His strength was not in his arms. It was in his eyes, in his wits. He pressed his shoulder against the crack, forcing his weight into it. With effort and pain, the stone tilted, rocked, and then toppled onto its side. The crowd gasped, some laughing in disbelief, others murmuring in respect. Celera's lips curved faintly. He sees what others do not. He endures. The second trial followed. A pit of fire, its heat blazing, with only a narrow path of stones across it. For a giantess, the leap was nothing. For a human, the stones were far apart, the heat choking. Daniel hesitated, sweat pouring down his face, the flames licking at his boots. He forced himself forward, stone by stone, each jump feeling like it would be his last. At the final leap, his legs scraped, nearly dropping him into the fire, but he rolled onto the far side, gasping, alive. The crowd roared, half in approval, half in anger that he had not failed. Celera's eyes never left him. He suffers, but he does not break. Finally came the third trial. Silence fell as a massive warrior stepped forward, taller and stronger than Celera herself. She carried no weapon. She needed none. She lowered her head, snarling. He faces me. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. How could he fight something so enormous? The warrior lunged, her hand reaching to strike him down. Daniel dove aside, rolling across the dirt. He could not match her in strength, but he could move, he could think. Each time she struck, he dodged, rolling between her feet, using her size against her. At last, as she reached for him again, he grabbed a fallen spearhead the size of his body and drove it into the ground before her. She tripped, stumbling, her massive body crashing into the dirt. The crowd erupted in chaos. Some shouted for his death. Others cheered his cunning. Celera raised her hand, silencing them all. Her golden eyes glowed as she looked down at him. He endures all three. He is chosen. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. But in his heart, one thought chilled him more than the fire had. He was not free. He was bound now, not only by words, but by triumph. The Giantess clan had seen him survive. And that meant he belonged to them. Solara's voice cut through the silence, firm and unyielding. You are not just mine, human. You are the key to saving us. Daniel looked up, his chest tight. Saving them. From what? The crowd roared again, but their cheers carried a strange hunger. He was no longer just a boy from the colony. He was now something far more dangerous, a symbol. And symbols could never walk away. The roar of the crowd still echoed in Daniel's ears long after the trial had ended. He sat on the edge of a stone platform within the Giantess stronghold, his chest heaving, sweat still damp on his face. Around him the warriors of Solara's clan muttered in voices like rolling thunder. Some praised his cunning. Others spat on the ground, furious that a small human had survived the ancient trials. But none of their voices mattered more than Solara's, and she had spoken clearly. He was chosen. Chosen. The word tasted bitter in his mouth. He had not chosen them. He had not chosen her. His only crime had been nervous politeness, words that had slipped from his lips before his mind could stop them. And yet those words now chained him, not only to Celera, but to an entire people. When the fires dimmed and the stronghold settled into uneasy silence, Celera came to him. She crouched, her vast shadow covering him completely, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Her voice was softer now, though still carrying the weight of command. You did well. You did not break. My clan respects you now. They see what I saw, that your words were not empty. Daniel's hands curled into fists. I never meant those words as a vow. I never meant to bind myself to you. Her head tilted, strands of copper hair sliding like molten metal over her shoulders. And yet, here you are. Do you think the law cares for what you meant? It cares only for what you spoke. And what you proved today. He looked away, his chest burning with frustration. So what happens now? Am I your prisoner? Your servant? What does this duty mean? Celera was silent for a long moment, as though weighing how much truth to give him. Then she spoke. My people are dying. Our bloodline weakens with each passing generation. We have strength, we have power, but it fades. We need something new. Something that will endure. When you spoke, I believed it was no accident. You were chosen by more than me. Perhaps by fate itself. Daniel's heart pounded. He heard the weight of her words, but he also heard the danger hidden within them. He was not just a man trapped by culture. He was being pulled into something far larger, something that threatened to consume his life entirely. You mean you want me to save your kind? I'm only one man. I can't save anyone. Celera leaned closer, her eyes narrowing. Do not underestimate what you are, Daniel. Your people are different. Your kind survives where others fall. You endured the trials, not with strength of body, but with strength of spirit. That is what we need. That is what I need. The word need struck him harder than the trials had. For the first time, Daniel saw not only the giantess warrior but the woman beneath the armor. She was bound by her people's expectations, just as he was. She believed in the law, in the vow. But perhaps there was something more personal in the way she looked at him. That thought unsettled him even more. The next days passed in a blur. Daniel was kept in the stronghold, watched closely but not treated cruelly. He was given food, water, even a chamber carved from stone to rest in. Yet the walls felt like a cage, and the eyes of the giantesses were bars he could not break. Some looked at him with disdain, others with curiosity, but all saw him as something no longer free. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what choice he truly had. If he refused Celera, if he defied their law, he knew what would happen. Her clan would see it as insult, as betrayal, and the fury of the giantesses would fall on his settlement. His people would burn for his defiance. But if he yielded, if he accepted this role, then he would lose himself. His freedom, his future, his life would no longer be his own. He was trapped between two fires, and either path promised to destroy something he cared for. On the fourth night, Celera came to him again. She knelt outside his chamber, her golden eyes catching the firelight. "You are restless," she said. "You fear me still." Daniel rose, his voice sharp with desperation. "Of course I fear you. You've stolen my life. You've taken me from my people. You talk about fate, about law, but all I see is chains." Her expression hardened, but her voice did not rise. "Chains? No. Duty. There is a difference. Chains break the spirit. Duty strengthens it. You will see this, in time." Daniel shook his head. "No. Duty means choice. It means giving yourself willingly. What you ask isn't duty, it's slavery." The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Celera's gaze burned into him, and for the first time, doubt flickered in her eyes. She had expected resistance, yes, but not words so sharp, so defiant. Slowly, she rose to her full height, towering above the chamber, her shadow swallowing him whole. "You speak boldly, human," she said at last. "Perhaps too boldly. My people will not forgive such defiance. They already question why I chose you. If they believe you weak, if they believe you unworthy, they will take you from me. And if that happens, you will not live to speak again." Her warning was not a threat, it was the truth. Daniel's blood ran cold. He realized then that he was not only trapped by Celera's claim but by the politics of her people. Rivalries brewed among the giantess clans. To some, his survival of the trials was proof of worth. To others, it was an insult that demanded correction. Celera leaned down one last time, her voice low, almost gentle. "Sleep, Daniel. Tomorrow you will stand before the elders of my clan. They will decide if you remain mine, or if you are cast aside. Be ready." Then she turned and walked into the night, leaving him alone with the echo of her words. Daniel sat in silence, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. The burden of choice had never felt heavier. He could try to resist, to fight for freedom, but freedom might mean death for himself and his people. He could yield, surrendering to Celera's claim, but that meant giving up everything that made him human. There was no clear path. Only danger. Only uncertainty. And as the fires outside burned low, Daniel knew one truth above all others: tomorrow would decide everything. The next morning came heavy with dread. The stronghold stirred with the sound of drums, slow and deep, echoing through the cliffs like the heartbeat of a giant. Daniel was led from his chamber by two warriors, their steps shaking the stone floor, their faces expressionless but their eyes sharp. He was not bound, but the weight of their presence made him feel like a prisoner all the same. Every step forward felt less like a walk and more like a march toward judgment. When he entered the council hall, the air grew colder. It was a vast cavern carved from black stone, lit by fire pits large enough to swallow wagons whole. At the far end, upon a platform carved into the shape of an eagle, sat the elders of Celera's clan. 5 towering figures whose hair was white as snow and whose eyes burned with centuries of memory. Between them, Celera stood tall, her armor gleaming, her expression unbending. The voices of the elders rumbled like mountains shifting. One of them, the eldest woman with scars across her jaw, leaned forward. "You bring the human before us, Celera. You claim his vow, his trials, his strength. Yet many doubt. Speak now. Why should this small one stand among us?" Celera's voice carried clear and strong. "Because he endured. Because his spirit burned when others would have broken. Because his words were not hollow. He is bound to me by law, and I will not release him." The council chamber filled with mutters. Some elders nodded with respect. Others frowned with disdain. Daniel felt their eyes like spears piercing his chest. Before he could speak, another voice rose, not from the elders, but from the side. A rival stepped forward. She was taller than Celera, her frame broader, her presence commanding. Her hair was black as obsidian, her eyes silver and cold. Her name carried through the hall like thunder. "Vera," someone whispered. A warrior feared even among her own kind. Vera's lips curved into a cruel smile. "Celera speaks of strength, but strength is not proven with tricks and games. He survived the trials by luck, not by power. He does not belong here. And if she is blind enough to claim him, then let him prove himself in truth." Celera's hand tightened on her weapon, her golden eyes flashing. "Vera!" But the rival cut her off with a raised hand. "Let him face the arena. Before all, let every clan see if this human truly has the strength to stand among us. If he fails, he dies, and Celera's claim is broken. If he succeeds, then I will bow my head, though I will not believe it." The council stirred, voices overlapping like storm winds. Some laughed, eager for blood. Others whispered of omen and fate. At last, the scarred elder raised her hand, and silence returned. Her gaze was sharp as a blade. "So be it. Let the human face the arena. Let the truth show itself." Daniel's heart nearly stopped. Arena. He did not need anyone to explain what that meant. He had seen the way the giantesses fought, their training grounds filled with stone weapons, their duels shaking the ground. To stand in their arena was not a trial. It was a death sentence. The drums returned, faster now, echoing with the rhythm of battle. Daniel was led out of the hall, and into the heart of the stronghold where the arena waited. It was a pit carved deep into the rock, its walls lined with thousands of giantesses gathered to watch. Their roars shook the ground, their chants thundering in a language he could not understand. The air was thick with smoke, fire, and expectation. Celera stood beside him at the edge, lowering her head so only he could hear. Her voice was low, fierce. "Listen to me. They will try to break you. But do not think you must match them in strength. You survived the trials with your mind. Do the same now. Remember who you are." Daniel's throat was dry, his body trembling, but her words struck something deep in him. He was small, yes. Fragile compared to them. But he was human. And humans had always survived by more than brute strength. The gates of the arena opened. Vera herself stepped inside, her silver eyes gleaming, her body towering like a wall of iron. She carried no weapon, only her hands, but Daniel saw in them the power to crush him like clay. She raised her arms, and the crowd roared her name. Then her gaze fell on him, sharp and merciless. The ground shook as she charged. Daniel dove aside, rolling across the dirt as her fist smashed into the earth where he had stood. The impact cracked stone, dust filling the air. The crowd screamed with laughter and cheers. Daniel scrambled to his feet, running, dodging as Vera's blows shook the arena. He was faster, yes, but only barely. His lungs burned, his legs ached, and every near miss reminded him how close he was to being flattened like an insect. But then, in the chaos, Daniel noticed something. Vera's attacks were wild, fueled by rage and pride. She struck with power, but little thought. Her size made her slow to recover after each missed blow. And the arena floor, scarred, cracked from years of battle, offered him places to move, to strike, to trap. An idea sparked. When Vera lunged again, Daniel darted toward one of the deeper cracks in the ground. He slid under her arm, rolling across the dust, and grabbed a broken spearhead half buried in stone. He was too small to wield it as a weapon, but he didn't need to. He drove it into the crack, wedging it tight. Then he ran, baiting Vera toward him. She roared, charging again, her fist raised high. Daniel dove aside at the last second. Vera's foot struck the crack where the spearhead lay, and the ground gave way beneath her. The stone collapsed, her weight dragging her down, her body crashing to the dirt in a thunderous fall. The arena shook with the force of it. For a heartbeat, silence. Then an eruption of chaos. Some shouted for his death anyway, furious that he had used cunning instead of brute force. Others roared with awe, impressed by his quick mind. Daniel stood panting, his chest on fire, dust covering his face. He looked up to see Celera at the edge of the arena, her eyes blazing, not just with pride, but with something more. Defiance. Triumph. But Vera was not finished. Slowly, painfully, the giantess pushed herself from the ground, her silver eyes burning with fury. Blood streaked her lip, but her rage only grew stronger. She turned her head toward him, and her voice thundered across the arena. This is not finished. Human, I will crush you with my bare hands. The crowd roared, half in madness, half in anticipation. The elders rose from their seats, their faces unreadable. The trial was no longer just a test. It had become a war of wills, and Daniel was trapped in the center. And as Vera advanced again, her shadow swallowing him, Daniel realized one terrifying truth: he might not survive the next strike. The arena had become a storm of voices, a thunder that threatened to shake the sky itself apart. Dust swirled around Daniel as he staggered back from the pit where Vera had fallen, his chest burning, his legs trembling. He had thought it was over when she crashed into the ground, but no, Vera rose again, her body scarred, her eyes wild with a rage that seemed inhuman. The crowd roared her name. Some screamed for Daniel's blood. Others called him clever, a trickster worthy of stories. But the decision would not be theirs. It would be the arena's. It would be fate's. Celera stood at the edge, her jaw set, her fists clenched tight enough to draw blood. She had sworn to protect him, sworn to honor the vow. But this was not a trial she could shield him from. Not here, not before all clans, not when the elders themselves had decreed the challenge. Daniel's survival lay in his own hands now, and every strike he faced would test not just his body, but the very bond between them. Vera's shadow loomed once more. She spat blood into the dirt and laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Clever little insect," she said, her voice booming. "But tricks won't save you now. This time, I crush you slow. This time, you feel what true strength means." Her steps shook the ground as she advanced. Daniel's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. He had no weapon, no shield, only his mind and his desperate will to live. He darted to the side as her fist came down, the impact splitting stone, spraying shards across the pit. Dust burned his throat, his ears rang with the crowd's deafening roar, but he kept moving, searching for any chance, any weakness. He found none. Vera was relentless. Blow after blow rained down, and though she was slower than him, fatigue was creeping into his limbs. His breaths grew shallow, his vision blurred. Every dodge was closer than the last. Soon, he would stumble. Soon, one strike would land. And when it did, it would end him. Celera's voice broke through the storm. "Daniel!" she roared, her golden eyes burning. He looked up, desperate, and for an instant her face was not warrior, not rival, not judge, but ally. "Do not fight her strength. Break her pride. That is the true battle." The words struck him like lightning. Break her pride. Not defeat her in body, defeat her in spirit. And then he saw it. The crowd. The thousands of giantesses watching. They were not silent. They were judging too. They had cheered when he outsmarted her before. They had seen his cunning, his will to survive. Vera's power meant nothing if he could turn their eyes, turn their judgment against her. Daniel straightened, his body screaming in pain, and shouted with a voice that carried across the pit. "Is this your champion? A giantess who cannot catch a human? Who smashes the earth like a beast, but cannot think beyond her fists?" The words struck like a blade. The crowd stirred. Murmurs rippled. Vera froze mid-strike, her silver eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought he had gone too far, but then he saw the fury in her face. Not at him. At the whispers, at the doubt beginning to spread, she roared and charged, faster, wilder, losing control. And Daniel, for once, stopped running. He stood near the broken ground where she had stumbled before. He waited until the very last second, until her massive shadow swallowed him whole, and then he dove aside, rolling across the dirt. Vera's foot struck the weak stone. The ground gave way beneath her once more, but this time her rage carried her forward, unbalanced. She fell hard, sprawling across the pit, her chest slamming into the earth. Dust exploded in a cloud around her, and when it cleared, she was on her knees, struggling to rise. But the crowd had already turned. Their chants no longer thundered her name. They cried out another, one word echoing across the arena with mounting force. Human. 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 Vera's eyes widened, her strength faltering. The sound of thousands praising Daniel crushed her pride more surely than any wound. She rose halfway, then stopped, her hands trembling. And at last, with a snarl of shame, she bowed her head and spat into the dirt. I yield. The arena erupted. The sound was not of anger now, but awe. The elders stood, their eyes wide, their expressions unreadable. Solara's gaze locked on Daniel, blazing with triumph and something deeper, something like pride, but also something more dangerous. The scarred elder raised her hand, and silence fell again. Her voice rolled like thunder. So it is proven. The human has broken strength with wit, survived with will, and earned the vow of Solera. From this day, his duty is bound. From this day, he is hers. The final words struck Daniel harder than any blow. He is hers. The arena roared with approval, but all he could hear was the weight of the decree. His chest heaved, his body shaking, his mind reeling with the truth of what had just happened. He had lived. He had triumphed. But now, there would be no escape. Solera stepped into the arena, towering above him, her shadow long and unyielding. She lowered her head, her golden eyes burning with fire that was half victory, half possession. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before, but no less dangerous. You are mine now, Daniel. Not as prisoner. Not as toy. As duty. As bond. As vow. And together, we will shake this world. Her hand, massive and calloused, closed around him, not to crush, not to harm, but to claim. The crowd thundered their approval, the arena shaking with the sound. And though Daniel's body still trembled from exhaustion, one thought echoed through his mind, louder than the drums, louder than the chants. He had stepped into a world of giants with nothing but words and will, and now he was no longer just surviving. He was part of something far greater, and far more dangerous. But deep inside, beneath the roar, a question burned unanswered. Had he just saved himself, or doomed himself forever?